So one of the biggest stories of these local government elections was the record number of independents contesting wards across the country. Last year, the Constitutional Court ruled that the electoral system should allow for independents not aligned to any political party to run for office. The One South Africa movement, led by Mmusi Maimane, used this poll as a launchpad to test the concept of a strong independent political challenge. With close to 500,000 votes cast for independence and an eye on 2024, South Africa's political landscape does seem destined for some big changes. Mmusi Maimane joins us now via our video link for more on the story. Mr. Maimane, thanks very much for coming on. We appreciate your time so early on a Friday morning. Incredible takeaways from these elections and the results over the past week. What stands out for you?
Good morning, and good morning to fellow South Africans. First and foremost, I think these elections have been significant in the rejection of the big parties, and certainly the need for change is occurring in our country. I think secondly, in the midst of a COVID environment, in the midst of the fact that I think as South Africans are building that alternative, independents and community-led organizations have done incredibly well. A great reminder that actually democracy is always local. It's about water, it's about electricity, it's about the things that happen in communities. And I really do believe more than anything, it sets up the trajectory for 2024 in that as we contested right throughout the country in various municipalities, it's clear that the confidence once enjoyed by a liberation movement has faded. And therefore, we need to build an alternative that emerges in the new South Africa with new talent of people, because that's been one of the key takeaways in this elections for me, has been that actually you can bring people who are not always political to come and stand in municipalities and bring about the change. And therefore, I'm confident and looking forward to say that change will occur in 2024. I don't believe that we'll have the same dominance of parties as we've had. And I think the sea change that is seen now says to me that the opportunity for a new government in 2024 is possible.
So One South Africa supported, according to the information I have here in front of me, supported 12 movements and 250 candidates across the country. And it's a discussion that has been had in many a voting line on social media platforms. People saying, you know, we were looking for Mmusi Maimane's One South Africa on the ballot paper.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason is because in a local government, it's actually many elections. And when we talk about the associations we put on the table, we organized, we wanted those associations to be put in communities closer to them. The change that we're going to put going forward towards 2024 is for people to be able to find that easily on a national ballot. But ultimately, because this is a local government election, we're very clear that in Cedarburg, let the people look for Cedarburg Eerste. In Mopani, let the people find Mopani Independent Movement. In Knysna, let them find the Knysna Independent Movement. And I can keep going with many of these associations. Because the second part of it is that if you put One South Africa on the ballot, your challenge sits where people say, now this councillor maybe potentially is not working, which I don't believe will be possible, but assume someone doesn't do something right. How do we exercise accountability? We want the people themselves to be able to go out and say, we will remove that person through that localized association. And that's the route we went. And perhaps there's a key lesson to be taken away from that. And building towards 2024, there very well will be some of these adjustments that we make.
So can you give us some of the latest numbers, just insofar as the movements that One South Africa supported and where they were actually able to win seats? I know of two movements in Cedarburg and in Knysna.
Well, I'm comfortable to say, at least even in those two, the New Horizon movement did very well. We can see that in Setsoto, they managed to garner closer to about 25%. I can see that in the Mopani district, which is in Limpopo, they were able to get a number of seats. I'm comfortable to learn that even in places like Enoch Mgijima, I think they were the second biggest party there. Collectively, we're very comfortable with the fact that even in places like Soweto, we showed growth. There have been some great numbers all across. So with the associations that we worked with, we're very positive about that. The associations that were affiliated with us, we've seen incredible growth in that many of them, if they didn't, they beat all the other smaller parties, came second or third. And so, to me, looking forward, if you aggregate all of it, include all the other independents across the country, the votes do clock up. And I'm comfortable to know that this has been a very excellent election for us.
So what do coalition talks look like now? Of the movements that One South Africa supported, how do you now go into these coalition talks in various regions?
Well, already there have been a number of parties that have reached out to me and sent me some sort of proposals on the table.
Which parties
but again,
are those?
It's not my duty to, for example, in Cedarburg, there are a number of parties that are working together. Dr. Ruben Richards is a mayoral candidate there, so he will want to work with the other parties in opposition to be able to unseat the incumbent party there. So part of the exercise we've got to do is not to negotiate for political parties' sake. You know, often these negotiations take place in back rooms. I have been part of many. And when I sit with many parties, often the negotiations have got very little to do with citizens. They're often about corner offices, what cars people want to drive, etc. And it's unhelpful because the citizens get forgotten. So what I have proposed, and this is the model we are going to use again, is to say, put on the table what the intention is to do for people. And then let's put those demands to the wards, to the communities, so that the communities can vote again to say we agree with this one or we don't agree with this one. Unless you become democratic in that sense, you're going to create a situation where ultimately, post that, you end up with a mandate given to a mayor, to a coalition that is unsustainable because the people did not buy into it. I think the flaws could be when people start to coalesce around race, to say let the black parties get together or the white parties get together, or coalesce worse, even around corruption, where people say we will loot and benefit only those people or that race. So the job we've got to do now in the maturation of our democracy is negotiate, but negotiate always with the citizens in mind. And that's what I've asked the independent movements to do, that we support. And ultimately, it's not going to be the last time negotiations have to take place, because next, within few months, all of these councils have to pass budgets. Those budgets have to be the reflective will of the people through IDP plans, so that when they go and articulate that or vote on that issue, it's a mandated vote where somebody sits back and says, my community wanted a bridge and we'll build a bridge in the community and it's in the budget. Now we can vote. Or we want sewage fixed, or we want water or electricity. All of these demands, suddenly through this independent movement, people have the power to negotiate. And that's what, to me, I think is positive in all of these hung councils, because now nothing can be taken for granted. And I think the hung councils will do well to heed the voice of the people.
I mean, you talk about these coalition talks happening with citizens and citizens' needs in mind. One would think that goes without saying. You're giving us just a little bit of a glimpse of what those coalition talks may have actually looked like in the past.
Certainly. And I think that's why always you need strong leadership at national level. You know, when we had to negotiate, it took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort, but I have the coalition agreement from 2016 that we signed with all the parties. And I can remember we were very ruthless at saying, this is about no excesses for political parties. This has to do with service delivery. Here are the focal points. It's not just about how you structure the council, but here are the delivery proof points. And in certain places, I can recall where negotiations I was in a part of, is when people in themselves, for example, in some remote part of the country, you find a councillor negotiating even sometimes to get back into the ANC. That's why we had to set up these associations so that people can trigger accountability. It's an important model for our democracy, because if we have a hung parliament in 2024, then these negotiations are going to matter. And we need a plan for South Africa for local government. I think our democracy has been well served for 27 years. Now, as we head towards 30 years, like any other thing, we need to ask ourselves the question, what reforms do we need to make? And as the 2022 deadline looms, we need to bring the direct election reform. And then when we're done with that direct election reform, where we can directly elect MPs or MPLs to Parliament, what accountability do we put for the citizens to be at the center? And furthermore, we need a new agenda. And it's why I'm working so hard to build that towards 2024 and achieve the change that we need in 2024.
I mean, 2024, 30 years since we first went to the polls in our first democratic election. Wow, 1994. I mean, what is your plan for the next national election as One South Africa?
Well, again, as I said, our timetable is fairly straightforward. We await for Parliament to comply with the Constitutional Court judgment to amend the Electoral Act so that there can be independent candidates in Parliament. But it's not only about that. We've also drafted the bill that we've tabled to Parliament to reform into a constituency-based model, because we think that all politics is local, and therefore people must know who they must go to ask for a school, to ask for a hospital, to ask for the very things that are competencies of provincial and national governments. So those need to be built. And then furthermore from that, we're working towards saying, once we know what that bill looks like, what that law looks like, we're going to then say what vehicle to is set up so that we can achieve the change that we need in 2024. And so that's what I'll be looking towards. And I would hope one day we can have direct elections of a president, of a premier, because then that way their accountability doesn't just sit with a political party, it sits with the people who have elected them. So that when they elect cabinets, executives, the consideration must be the people, not the political party. So to me, I think it sets us up great, and that's what One South Africa will be championing from now till 2024.
Yeah, the end of political deployments. Mmusi Maimane, let me thank you for your time. He's the leader of the One South Africa movement.